Welcome to the Swamp. My name is Excaligator. I rate survival open world sandbox games based on many categories, which I then average together to rate them as an overall. This, however, is not a game review, but an animated show about a very popular video game called Ark Survival Evolved, now also known as Ark Survival Ascended. Ark is a game that I've played for well over 2,400 hours and counting. During my adventures with Ark from the first week of early access up until now with the up-and-coming additions, with the graphical updated version, and slowly more and more over time, the story was added to the game through all of the small notes you could find around the maps, while most of them were notes regarding, flora and fauna, as well as recipes for potions and poisons. You did start to see a pattern with various named people such as Helena and Rockwell, though through the notes you can find also journal pages that not only are about the wildlife, but also what happens to these characters in both their present and their past lives. At some point, enough information was gathered to tell out a somewhat fleshed out story of all of these characters and their adventures through the various arcs, like The Island, Scorched Earth, Aberration, which all happened before we as the player arrived. This animated series is all about the adventures of these characters who were on the Ark before us and what transpired, as well as maybe some more insight into the deeper lore as well. With that out of the way, I have divided this review into two parts. A non-spoiler section where we will talk about the art style, pacing, and general sense of how I feel with the writing. After that, you will be warned ahead of time, but I will have a spoiler section where I talk about the story itself in a brief manner, which each of these sections I will give my own little mini rating, which will then round up to an overall rating similar to how I do my video game reviews. And just to remind you, this show is actually incomplete. There are supposed to be 7 more episodes for this season that have not aired and have currently no release date. So this is all going to be rather a first impressions of episodes 1 through 6. So now let's get into it.
You've got some explaining to do, little friend.
Talk about the art style. I am a huge supporter of 2D animation, and seeing this almost look like an old cartoon from the 90s like Gargoyles or Batman the Animated Series, but with obviously better effects, color hues, and so much more to enhance it, it definitely looks amazing. Some of the many dinosaurs, you can tell exactly what they are just with a first look without having a character tell you what they are, especially if you are an Ark player. There was maybe 1 or 2 times that the dinosaurs looked a bit off. I would say the T-Rex from an artistic side was a little bit too, I would say, chunky, too blocky, but the raptors, ankylosaurs, and so many more are done right. A small nitpick I have is that there is a bit too much of the bloom effect. The game is also guilty of this, where the brightness of certain areas in a scene will just cause a glare effect that blurs out most of the screen. It overall reduces the clarity, and I found it very distracting. I could understand if it was used for the flashback scenes, but it was used everywhere a bit too much. And one last nitpick was the lip syncing. Animation doesn't have to be perfect, obviously. You have Japanese anime where, the lips just move up and down with like 2 animation poses with little to no variation, while you have other animations where the lip sync matches perfectly to the actor's tone and expression. This, though, is an odd mix of both, where the animators almost animated the lips before the recording, so the actors had to make the lines work with what was there. I don't know if that's actually what happened, that's just how it looks and feels. But either way, the art style is great and one of the driving points for me, so I'm gonna rate it a 4.5 out of 5. The only small nitpick of the bloom effect and the mouth syncing is what caused that small decrease in the rating.
You're new here. Come on.
I'm not going anywhere with you.
You don't know how you got here, right? You woke up in the water, washed up on the beach.
So this is odd. The first episode is almost an hour long, the 6th episode is about 40 minutes, and the other episodes are all between 25 and 30 minutes long. The first episode was great as it properly introduced us to our main character Helena, as well as 2 of the other main characters for that season. The pacing was on point, it hit every beat and kept me interested, though by episode 2 I felt that the pacing went severely downhill, as I felt now that everything had to be rushed to fit all into this 25-minute long episode. The 3rd episode also suffered from from this, the 4th and the 5th episodes did a lot better. While I wish the 4th episode was a bit longer, it felt alright. Same with the 5th episode. And the last episode, which is the 6th episode, was much better paced as well. Overall, strong start, dropped down badly, but then slowly got better. For that, I'm gonna rate the pacing a 3 out of 5. The music is already a 5 out of 5 in my book, just for the orchestrated remakes of all the ARK soundtracks. While they're not the exact same ones from the game, you can clearly hear the various tones and music notes from music that you would recognize as an ARK player, such as the beach theme. There's even tones here and there from the jungle theme, as well as the boss battle theme. Everything about the music is amazing, though of course there is one issue that I unfortunately have to bring the score down a bit for, but that is several times within the show there would be, a moment where characters are talking to each other and the music was just so loud that I couldn't understand what was being said. I counted this happening at least 3 or 4 times, which was a bit annoying. As for the sound design, they used sound effects from the game itself where it counted. It didn't feel too out of place or in your face for that matter, but it was enough to let those who play ARK pick up on various audio cues, such as various dinosaur sounds, some of the items that were being used by the main cast, and in that section, I have no complaint. Even at one point, I heard a Wilhelm scream, which, is a famous, decades-long meme. I won't say when it happens, you can find that out for yourself, but you'll know it when you hear it. This section, I'm gonna rate a 4.5 out of 5. Again, I just lowered it a small amount due to the music volume at certain points being so high, but the rest of it is solid.
Rockwell must have found you dangerous indeed. Although I imagine he had it coming.
The story delivery was pretty good for the most part. I did have my pacing issues in episodes 2 and 3, but the rest was solid. They introduced you to all of the current cast of characters as well as their 3 backstories, being Helena's, Maylin's, and John's. The progression of the characters meeting each other and learning trust as well as building various forms of relationship felt somewhat natural and realistic. I say somewhat because of the pacing I mentioned, as well as there's no real clear passage of time, though it was mentioned in dialogue that maybe a day or so had happened from a certain event, which felt that there was too little of time passage for something to happen. But another gripe I have is that the actions and building of character progression worked very well, but the dialogues between characters felt very bland and simple, boring at times, most notably during a scene where they're planning an attack, and just listen to this.
This was a meeting to go over how we're gonna get Core on our side. Show him the fancy new weapon, prove we can beat Nerva this time. I set this whole thing up. It took like all day. Look here. If we take a small group north, the rest of us can protect the village and scout out Nerva's camps. What do you think? Maybe?
That is actually rather a good idea, Alassi.
I'm sorry, but that's just some shitty-ass dialogue. That is going to bring the score down a lot to a 3 out of 5 for the story delivery. Mind you, this is not the story itself, it's just how it's delivering the story. But now it's time to get into the meat and potatoes and move on to the spoiler section. So if you wish to skip this section, I will have a timestamp for you to see the final score of the first impressions.
Once the bonds of fate are broken, anything is possible.
To start off, I'm going to talk about the characters themselves, then I'll move into the overall story. Firstly, we have Helena. She is the main character and hero of the story, which we obviously knew from the video game, but she is front and center here for the show. Helena is a woman of roughly our day and age from Australia who is a scientist, mostly in paleontology, which is the study of dinosaurs, but she also seems to have a more niche interest in their behavioral patterns as well as evolutionary traits from not only selective breeding but also localizations of various species. This becomes her greatest advantage while on the Ark, as she is familiar with all the various creatures in ways that the rest are simply not, and she is able to use her knowledge to manipulate the creatures how she wishes by using their behavioral patterns. Next you have Mei Lin, who is from ancient China. While it wasn't fully explained, her family seems to be from a rebellion group to overthrow the Emperor of China. Her parents were killed in their sleep, leaving her and her brother to be trained in the art of war by her grandfather. Her skills are in strength, but she does have major flaws, that she is arrogant and tends to tunnel vision in revenge before her safety, as well as the safety of others. Then you have John, who is a Native American chieftain. They didn't say exactly what time period. I'm assuming it's about the 1800s, as the colonizers have already a foothold in America, and it seems that he is from some of the Midwestern states. So if it's not along the East Coast where the Europeans first landed, I'm assuming it's in those middle states, as I just said. You then have his adopted daughter, who for the life of me I cannot remember her name, but her backstory was never really looked on upon, so I'm not gonna really worry about that. Now you have Rockwell, a name that every Ark player should know, as he is not only who writes up the various recipes for food and potions, as well as the herb lore notes that you can find throughout the Arks, but he is also the primary villain of the game. His backstory is not looked back upon in these few episodes, though from the teaser trailer of Part 2, it will be explained later on. Either way, you can see from right off the bat that he is only out for himself, looking for power. He works with the strongest tribe in order to keep himself alive just long enough so he can gain the upper hand. Seeing his cunning and conniving nature leads to the idea that he will become a bigger threat in the future, which I love. And finally, you have General Gaius, or Gaius, something like that, who is from the Roman Empire. While his backstory was then not fully explored in flashbacks like the other characters, it was talked about enough to gain an understanding of his motives. In the first episode, there was even a moment where you had sympathy for him, though it was quickly dismissed when his true ambition came to light. While on the Ark, he is the dominant force and the leader of what Ark players call an Alpha tribe, enslaving the newbies and spawn-killing lobies. He has a horde of dinosaurs under his control, as well as an army of PvP gankers. Now that we covered the characters, I'll briefly go through the events of these episodes, though I won't say much as I still want for you to enjoy it. The show starts off with Helena waking up and being chased by a Megalodon, only to wash up on shore after being saved by a lead who ate the Megalodon. Finding her first tame, which is a dodo, she then meets Bob, who is a meme character based off a newbie's first time playing Ark, naked and living on the beach with the basic primitive gear. Funnily enough, they gave him a backstory which explains that he is from the 1940s and died on Normandy Beach. I actually laughed when he called Helena one of the good guys because she is from Australia. It was also heartwarming when she told him the outcome of the war, and he smiled that the Alliance had defeated the Axis powers of World War II.
So you must know how the war ends. You're Australian, right? One of the good guys.
Do we?
Yeah, we win.
We win.
Though it was not to last, because around 5 minutes into the episode, he is spawn killed by the PvPers, who then hunt down Helena. She is eventually captured and taken to General Gaius' camp, where we are first introduced to Rockwell. He explains that this place is not a type of afterlife as the others think, but it's something more, which he has named the Ark. Which, if you are familiar with the biblical story, the Ark is a vessel used to save the species of a local population during a devastating event, which relates a lot to this story if you know the overall themes of it. Though moving on to Gaius himself, they both learn that Helena is an educated and resourceful woman by watching her actions against them, as well as some minor dialogue between them. Gaius is also impressed at her knowledge of not only Latin, but about the dinosaurs themselves, more so than Rockwell. It didn't last long though, as Helena tries to escape by putting her brains to use and poisoning the general with a paralysis poison from a snail she picked up earlier while she was exploring with Bob. A bit later, she uses her cunning again to escape, but not after being hurt by Gaius, who gets a spear thrown through her. During this time, we see the rest of her flashbacks where it explains how she died. While it was alluded to before, everyone on the Ark has one thing in common. they all died and somehow ended up here from their various nations and times. While most of them ended up resorting to English to communicate, some of them still have their national tongues and are used frequently both on the arc as well as in the flashbacks, which I liked. And even then, that doesn't mean everyone learned English, as you see one woman in the show who I am assuming is Scandinavian, but she never learns English and only speaks in her native tongue. During a brief moment of remembering how she died and the reasoning for it, she convinces herself to live and to fight on, which catches the attention of Mei Lin, who saves her. Mei Lin brings her to a cave where they find and defeat the Brood Mother boss battle. Okay, I guess that's done and over with in the second episode, and their boss loot ends up being a frickin' tech gun. After blasting their way out of the cave, they head back to another tribe led by John, who is a bit standoffish, but more friendly than Gaius' tribe. That is essentially the first 2 episodes. The third episode seemed a bit of a side quest while developing relationships, and the 4th episode was roughly the same, though I liked it a bit better than the 3rd episode as it led to another villain character who serves under Gaius. She is an ex-gladiator who fought roughly in the same time as Gaius, though serves him now. She is merciless and enjoys the thrill of killing and watching others being killed. Helena questions her on why she does this to people when this happened to her. She takes her life into her own hands, as she believes that doing what she does gives her the freedom she craved. But also, now that she has the power to control her own life, she seeks to keep it by making her subjects fear her. As she explains, any of them would want to kill her for her seat. She does not trust anybody and makes sure that they cannot relax around her either. I actually like this side character, and it looks like we'll get to see more of her in the unreleased episodes of the show. After Helena escapes the gladiator woman, they return home to soon be attacked by the Alpha tribe. The base is destroyed with many people dying, and most of them getting away crossing a swamp, which had some funny yet brutal scenes of NPCs being killed by everything that normally kills an ARC player at low levels. Meanwhile, Mei Lin and Gaius have a face-off to finally see who would win. It was a neat fight, but overall ruined as Rockwell tranks Mei Lin, leaving Gaius furious that he couldn't get to see who was the strongest between them. He takes Mei Lin and tortures her at his main base, hoping that Helena would come to rescue her so he could finally kill her for taking the green relic from him. The last episode of the show is John and Helena sneaking into the large base and planting spark powder around the various oil reserves, but as Helena sees Mei Lin, she tries to rescue her. Mei Lin is surprised by this and is also impressed, as this was a choice that Mei Lin unfortunately did not pursue in her former life, as shown in a flashback where her tunnel visioning gets the better of her and gets both her and her brother killed. From there, Gaius springs his trap, but that only allows for John to spring his own. As the gates blast open, you have T-Rexes, Stegosaurs, and all manner of beasts fighting while the humans slaughter each other on the ground. There is an even more bigger threat here, but I don't wish to spoil it in terms of the dinosaur reveal. Eventually, it all ends with a badass fight between John and Gaius, with Helena and Mei Lin escaping, setting up for the remainder of the episodes. As I said, there is a lot of really fun aspects in this show that is straight out of the game itself, and it will be fun to watch for fans of the game. Though, real quick, and I'm sorry if this is going to upset people, but there is an issue of some, I'm going to call them modern day politic talking points in this show. While you are watching the various parts of the show when they're in the arc itself, there's absolutely no issue. There's nothing directly in your face, and any little tidbit was usually done in a realistic sense, such as there being natural diversity, as the arc is meant to have tons of people from all different walks of life randomly spawn there, so there is no issue at that. I don't even have an issue with the fact that Helena is gay, though some of her scenes were a bit too mushy for me, but that's just an overall lovey-dovey kind of thing. And even her relationship with Mei Lin is built upon over time and didn't really seem rushed. That's all fine. There's only 2 issues I have with this. One of them, a bit of a nitpick, really, not really that important, but the other one was a bit more over the head. And the 2 scenes I am talking about are Mei Lin's past, where she had woman warriors in her past life fighting for her, as well as the other scene of Helena's mother with her activism. Mei Lin as a woman fighter was a bit of an exception due to her bloodline and training, but they even said that her brother was to be the heir due to him being male. That's realistic and that's fine, but you would never see an actual woman in the army. So seeing them fight in the army that they, had was kind of forced in my opinion. Again, that's just my little nitpick. It didn't bother me too much. It was just something that I noticed. What did bother me was the opening of the second episode, where you see Helena as a little girl with her mother, bringing her into a rally where they are fighting for Australian Aboriginal rights. I'm not going to comment on the real life issues there, as I am both American with little knowledge on the subject of the matter itself, and I'm not here to talk about real life issues. And that's why it bothered me for the scene to be in the show. I would be fine with them saying in passing that her mother was an activist, as it does affect Helena's story progression, but they spent several minutes on this scene in particular, which felt nothing more than hitting over the head with propaganda, especially when they had an anti-activist group of all white people attack them first. With today's political and cultural strain everywhere, especially from 2016 into 2020 and into today, everyone is hypersensitive right now to these issues, and the biggest concern from everyone in this sphere is that we do not need these modern issues in forms of media where we're trying to escape them, if not for just 30 minutes to just watch an episode about dinosaurs. Even after the fact, during another flashback, Helena even tells her mother that while it was for a good cause, protesting is getting her nowhere in life, and she wants to focus more on her studies and science. It's briefly mentioned at one point that Helena even has a criminal record, so that probably means she has gone to prison for her protesting. So on one end, the mother being an activist is a good point of storytelling to help encourage Helena to change her life and to seek knowledge. But on the other hand, I just felt the scene itself was handled in a way that it just felt like pure propaganda and did not need to be there. Anyway, I don't wish to dwell on this much longer, as again, this is a video to review ARC. I have no interest in talking about real world politics on this channel. I just wanted to make mention that, I don't really like that it's present in this show, to the point that it drew me out for several minutes and it could have been handled a lot better. Now then, the story of these 6 episodes are only half of the season. The second half is already been teased, but no confirmed release date. So for now, what we got, I'm gonna rate the story of these 6 episodes a 4 out of 5.
See, Rockwell? Competence is rewarded after all. For the glory I will restore to Rome. For her glory.
Now then, my overall score for the ARC animated series, at least for the first 6 episodes, is going to be a 4 out of 5. It is a solid start to the show for sure. I loved the brutality as well as the fun callbacks to the game itself. I loved delving into the stories of all the different characters, learning their motivations, seeing them all work together, even through strained relationships. And I only dropped it in the rating for the few nitpicks of the pacing, the odd bloom effects, and the loud music drowning out dialogue in a few spots. Since the season is already finished in terms of production, I don't really see many changes to come out of the next 7 episodes, but we can only wait to see how the second half plays out. I hope you enjoyed my rather lengthy review of the ARC animated series. I don't often do this, but I made an exception because this show is based on one of my favorite survival games ever, and I'm looking forward to the next episodes that come out. And until then, if you wish to see reviews on ARC, as well as other video games that are similar in nature, hit like, hit subscribe, let me know what games you want to see me review in the future, and I will see you next time. Florida Gator Man out.